Welcome to the Poisoning Podcast, where we shine a light on the fentanyl epidemic and the fight against addiction. I'm your host, Erin DeLullo. Today, we're joined by Kentucky Attorney General Russell Coleman, a former U.S. attorney with a career dedicated to law enforcement and public safety. From prosecuting traffickers to protecting families, he's on the front lines of one of the most urgent battles of our times. And also, full disclosure, he is someone that I work with. So now, let's dive in. Attorney General Coleman, welcome to the Poisoning Podcast.
I'm delighted to be here, Erin. I'm grateful for your time and willingness to dive in over and over into this darkness, some of the toughest issues we face. You talk about on a regular basis, but you do it with optimism and pragmatism about how we work our way through this. So thanks for staring into the darkness again and again.
Oh, that's a great way to put it. I try to wear a happy warrior hat while facing these issues. So I want to start. We know each other, obviously, but I did not know you when you were in law enforcement previous to your current position. So you were in the FBI. You were a U.S. attorney. How did you deal at all, if it was applicable, with the drug crisis then? What did you see then that you now put in your job as Attorney General?
Unlike our kids, any of your viewers, listeners' kids now that face this this omnipresent threat that I look forward to us digging into, I grew up in an environment where drugs were marijuana may have been was present occasionally, but not just awash in the threatening environment we have now. It was not the normal. So my exposure to dope, the dope world, to addiction, and then to treatment was as a young FBI agent stationed in southern Indiana, of all places, outside of Indianapolis, in a town called Bloomington, which is where Indiana University is. It's a great college town in an otherwise rural area in southern Indiana, and we had campus that was our area of responsibility in a large swath of the country. And where I became aware, and it was at the same time that in the Appalachian sections of Kentucky, and I'm from the other end of the state, but it was when the pill epidemic started bubbling up, not only in Appalachia. One of my first collaborative investigations with my partner at the time, and I was in a small office, a small RA, was what the model that became known across the country of a pain clinic that was in all actuality drug dealers in white coats. It was a pain clinic that had multiple franchises throughout southern Indiana, and it was rolling out to knock on doors and sit down with patients, ultimately witnesses, in our investigation of this clinic, and hearing stories of pain patches that were chewed, or pills that were cooked and prepared in a certain way to destroy the time release mechanism, as many of your viewers know, with OxyContin. And it was descriptions of loss, of death, of family members and friends dying from overdoses, from medications that were prescribed by a physician. And this was one of the first large pain pill investigations I ultimately conducted. We took down multiple locations of this pain pill, this purported medical practice. In my investigation, I talked to a number of the employees, and it was the stories that the purported medical practice, which was just a quick box to be checked before a script pad was signed for cash. That's where I came to see, and I didn't know, lo and behold, what was going on back in my home state of Kentucky.
Yeah, so you thought it was maybe just localized to this
It
area.
was localized. Yeah, it just seems so bizarre. It seems so aberrant. That physicians they take an oath. They're, and not to sound Pollyanna, but this was me in my late 20s. Physicians take an oath to heal. Physicians aren't drug dealers. Drug dealers look a certain way. Drug dealers drive certain kinds of vehicles. It was that era, frankly, where addiction was somebody else, outside of alcoholism, which was a bit of a through line. We know that, but addiction to pain pills, addiction to other substances, addiction to methamphetamine, that was some other neighborhood. That was clearly I was in Indiana. That wasn't my home state, or that was another region, or that was someone else's family. Like that was back in an era, and we're talking 2006, 2007, 2008, when we could still say that was somebody else, or you could still point the finger elsewhere. It wasn't us then. It wasn't everywhere. It wasn't ubiquitous then. Later, I served. I had the opportunity to serve as Senator McConnell's legal counsel, and in addition to working on portfolios of transportation and banking during Dodd-Frank, but I had the drug portfolio. And then Congressman Hal Rogers was someone that has been very out front on this space in recognizing that we were siloed, recognizing that law enforcement alone was not going to mitigate what his district was just on fire. And for your listeners, your viewers, Hal Rogers, Congressman Rogers, a legend in Kentucky politics and in the appropriations world in the House, his district is one of the poorest in terms of per capita in the country, very economically disadvantaged. This is a district where the rug of coal has been pulled out from under these communities that were so reliant on this extracted minerals. And in this district, you had miners that needed to work to provide for their families. And so instead of an orthopedic surgery to fix the bum knee or the elbow, they were given medications to just gut through it and get back to work. And so that the pill epidemic, Appalachia was on fire. And what they saw was, and this is a different model than we see now, right? Most commonly, but what you saw was that era of the legitimate recipient, the post-surgical recipient, and the slippery slope being told, hey, this isn't addictive, but this will get you back to work. This will get you back to work. Surgery or pill, I'm all in for the pill. And what we saw is when those pills ran out, when the legitimate period ran out, we had folks they're trying to work that were addicted to opioids. And then we saw that cycle into street medications, and Appalachia was on fire. And so working in the Senate, we partnered with Congressman Rogers' office to try to mitigate this as we saw it evolving and moving throughout the state. You could almost bifurcate the Commonwealth of Kentucky. The eastern portion was on fire with opioids and pills that became heroin, that became the fentanyl dynamic now, and the other synthetics. The western part of the state, think flat agricultural tobacco patches, that was methamphetamine. That was the land of clandestine labs then. And we didn't have the poly drug environment that we do now. So it was, how do we mitigate meth in the west and pills in the east from a policy perspective? Later, as the United States Attorney, look, it didn't take a rocket scientist to know what I needed to be focused on. It was violence in this great city where I sit now, violence in Louisville, which is our urban core, but it was mitigating the overdose deaths that were on fire. Our numbers were spectacularly high. We were far beyond that era of it's somebody else. Everyone has been impacted. The numbers were stunning, and even those that survived, our emergency departments were filled with non-fatal overdoses. We were becoming a land of zombies here in the Commonwealth, and so we had to tackle that by tackling the drug trafficking organizations, the infrastructure that was pouring into the Commonwealth, and a lot of times that drug trafficking organization involved medical practices, it involved physicians, it involved small town docs that were well respected in their communities. It was a major cultural pivot and disruption point for us. So it became very real when it was my responsibility to protect 53 counties as the United States Attorney. Ultimately, it was my job. And sitting with those, it was almost circular. It was almost back to my early days as an investigator, sitting with victims, sitting during trial prep, talking with those that have lost loved ones. You've done it on this podcast. You've done it personally. You're sitting in West Virginia. You know the power of what I'm talking about here.
You bring up polysource drugs, and just last week, here in West Virginia, in our capital of Charleston, we had about 30 people overdose within less than 24 hours. They were miraculously all saved by Narcan, but
Yeah.
to see that many people, and when I say it's the capital, it's not the size of Washington, D.C. This is a very sort of small area to have 30 some plus people all overdose. And they're not all together, they random, but they got the same batch of illicit street drug and it was a poly source and they're still trying to figure it out because it had fentanyl, but something else.
Yeah.
So I'm so glad you bring up that it's just not fentanyl anymore. And you've led the way on a designer Xanax, a benzo, and pronounce it for us because it's not an easy one.
So on a hard day, I just go with designer Xanax, but it's
Right.
bromazolam, bromazolam,
Bromazolam.
and when it's a cautionary tale. And
Yeah.
if there's nothing your listeners take from my time with you, I want to I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this because it's a cautionary tale for the new normal that we're going to have to face, and we're going to have to design and redesign our institutions to be responsive to this. Uh,
Yes.
I was at a memorial, well, at a law enforcement memorial area. We were announcing something actually pretty positive. We were standing in front of a wall of fallen law enforcement officers and talking about a program we have to push body armor out to our law enforcement officers. We had about 20% of our officers didn't have body armor in the Commonwealth, and so this was a press
Mhm.
conference announcing that we had closed that gap to 1% from 20%. So this was a good story. This was a good day, and I was surrounded by different uniforms of different agencies of those that have received this body armor. And at the end of it, and this is why it's so important for us in these positions to get out of our office and to do more, as much as we're talking on it, to do more listening than talking. And so I had a drug task force commander come up to me, totally off topic, but he said, Russell, I want to flag something for you. In this area of northern Kentucky, which is suburban Cincinnati, it's a vibrant area here in the Commonwealth, a large population center, a lot going on, a lot of commerce. You have the Northern Kentucky Airport. You have Amazon here. It's a wonderful area, right on the Ohio River. The drug task force had seen an uptick in this bromazolam, which I'd never heard of. And he showed me
Mm.
a photo of it, and it's indistinguishable oftentimes from the bar of Xanax, that little white bar, chiclet looking thing that many of your listeners, many who
Yeah.
are legitimately prescribed Xanax, it's almost exactly like Xanax. It's hard to distinguish it. And that's why we call it designer Xanax. And this is a synthetic substance, more than likely either produced in China, or the components are produced in China and assembled in Mexico. Why is this important? They had seen an uptick, not only the presence of this new stuff, this new poison, but they had seen an increase in deaths, almost 50 deaths the previous year associated, and maybe more, because in a polydrug environment, that there are no meth users or opioid addicts anymore. Everyone's a polydrug user. Everyone's using whatever they can get their hands on. Oftentimes, as in Charleston, it's a mixture. It is an upper and a downer. It's an opioid, and it is a depressive substance. So um, his ask was not only, hey, we're seeing this. His ask was, we need to get this scheduled because it's a new substance. Think of it as something mixed up in a chemistry set. Our statutes require, in order for us to charge felonies, to charge trafficking, to really bring the hammer on those that are distributing, these substances have to be on a list. They have to be scheduled, and that process, there's both a federal process and a state process. In order for us to really deter the conduct and bring felony charges, those substances have to be on the prohibited substances list. Need to be Schedule 1. It's a long process at the federal level. It's very relatively easy at the state level. It requires a governor to emergency schedule, and unfortunately, for myriad reasons, there had not been any purchase by this effort to get our own governor here in the Commonwealth to emergency schedule. And so that's it. We polled around the state to see if we were seeing this elsewhere. We were seeing it start to metastasize from this region, but we were ultimately able to get that scheduled, seeking that our wrote to the governor, pushed a bit in order to get our governor to sign off on it, and it's scheduled now. We now have that tool in our toolkit. We've reached out and have active engagement with the DEA. they're pushing internally to emergency schedules. So hopefully, in the very near term, that list of stories at the bottom of your email in the
Yeah.
poisoning will have a story about bromazolam being emergency scheduled. Why is this so important?
Yeah.
Other states have scheduled it because many states have seen this. Virginia, for instance, we've seen an increase in this substance in West Virginia. Ohio have it arrived there sooner than in Kentucky, which of course triggers the old Mark Twain joke that if the world ends, he wants to be in Kentucky because everything happens here 20 years later. Sometimes that's true a bit, but it allowed us to now bring felony hammers to deter that conduct. We're going to continue to see more of that, Aaron. Our institutions are built from a model that doesn't anticipate threats like this appearing and metastasizing so quickly. The old Tom Friedman, the world is flat, is both positive and negative in economic terms. On the negative side, we're seeing these new substances pop up from China and have to be able to respond to them, have to be able to bring the regulatory tools to bear so that we can punish, so we can incapacitate those that bring these substances, so that we can elevate awareness in terms of prevention and that we can be more effective on the treatment side. It's all three legs of the stool as we see these new substances. And we're pleased to finally get there here in Kentucky so we can effectively address it. But we're going to see more and more of this model. What is this designer Xanax today will be some new fentanyl product, carfentanil, tomorrow. And we're seeing this. We're constantly seeing new chemistry set experiments and at scale. And we in government have to be able to run faster.
Yes. A great point about running faster in government. I mean, I was just reading in the Boston Globe this week about carfentanil and the overdoses they're experiencing in New Hampshire from that drug. And I think,
What would you pause for a moment?
yes,
I know
yes.
you have a very educated group of listeners and viewers, but what I found early on
Yeah.
as U.S. attorney is I would use the term fentanyl and throw it around. And we
Mm,
realized that there's still a lot of people that don't know necessarily what fentanyl is, and that certainly don't know
mm.
what carfentanil is. So, as me, you, as those that have a duty to communicate this, I feel like at the beginning of every discussion, we need to define what it is. And I've already failed at this and not defining fentanyl. But will you back up and
Mhm.
what are we talking about when we talk fentanyl versus the 100 times stronger elephant tranquilizer? It's carfentanil. What are those two substances?
So carfentanil is a synthetic opioid. It can be, it varies because these are not accurate labs making these pills, but it can be 100 times stronger than fentanyl. And
Yep.
then we've discussed personally nitazines, which hit my area this spring and killed several teenagers. It is not a synthetic opioid, but it acts like one. So again, we are living in a polysubstance world. Nothing is pure. Naloxone, which I have right behind me, should work on all three of those substances to revive someone. But the designer Xanax, naloxone doesn't work on, folks. So this is why we have to continuously hit it home to people about not taking the pill. Because if you're taking it, you don't know if the naloxone or Narcan's going to work to revive you.
You,
I think
you
there's an
don't know
assumption. I think there's an assumption now because it's so effective
that the risk is mitigated
that the risk is
because
mitigated.
naloxone is so effective, and because we you can a user can never
No.
know the purity. And I mentioned it. We talked polydrug. The depressant is the benzodiazepine. So
Yes.
that I was struggling a moment ago for
Yeah.
my pharmaceutical nomenclature. But the depressant we see is that which used to be a red flag that a physician is operating outside of the bounds of medical practice when they would prescribe both a benzodiazepine and an opioid in tandem. That was always a sign of risk in terms of the potential criminal subject that we were looking at that happened to wear a white coat. But as you just pause for a moment, we're talking about a
Hmm.
substance potentially 100 times stronger than fentanyl. Fentanyl itself
Mm-hmm.
is 50 to 100 times stronger than morphine.
Mm-hmm.
Fentanyl and most of most folks who have been in surgery have been exposed to fentanyl in that controlled post-surgical environment. It's been around a while. It's just not been on the street a while. And so these substances we're seeing, fentanyl, carfentanil, it's a reminder of this era that we're policing in, enforcing in, or at the base level, being a dad or a mom in, trying to raise kids in. It is a no margin of error environment, and it's the goal in our discussion today is not it's not to scare people. It's to remind us that we are parenting in an environment where our kids are walking a razor's edge. And you and I have talked about this before.
Yeah.
We may have made, and I certainly made bad decisions as a kid, dumb decisions. It wasn't in the dope space, but I did stupid stuff. And maybe the worst thing that could have happened is I could have had a broken arm or been in some trouble at school. But our environment now, whether it's images on phones,
Yeah.
whether it's decisions made in communication on phones, or especially what we're talking about, especially there, that our kid could take a pill after practice, after football practice. They're sore. Hey, this looks like something I'm already prescribed. This will take the edge off. And a decision, a 2 or 3 second decision for a kid
Mm.
whose cognitive development is not there yet. It's just a dumb decision could end their life and is ending their life. Anecdote after anecdote of parents that are burying their kids that just made a dumb call. That there is no margin of error, and so we have to have uncomfortable conversations with our kids a lot earlier. I want to guard my kids' hearts. I mean,
Mm.
Scripture tells us to guard our hearts, guard loved ones' hearts. You can't do that anymore. We can't guard their hearts in this environment, or we're going to be burying them. And that's not the prosecutor beating the podium. That's the dad that is scared to death about this environment we're raising kids in.
Same. I mean, my eldest went to high school this fall, and he's probably more annoyed at mom's podcast than anything, or seeing like that we have Narcan in so many places. But
Yeah,
I
Mom's a
I took him
celebrity. He's proud
aside.
of mom.
I mean, thank you. But I took him aside. I'm like, Burke, I'm really excited for you to go to this new school, and there's going to be a lot of people we don't know. And, I just ask, honey, like, don't take any drugs someone gives you. Or if you hear about someone like handing out drugs, just sort of let me know. And he goes, Mom, I don't want anybody's drugs. I don't want drugs. I don't like them. But I'm not going to tell on anybody else. I'm like, so okay, honey. Well, first, I think I won in step one. I got step one taken care of. It's not that I want to send a 10th grader to jail or a 14-year-old to jail, but we just should know that there might be something out there. So I'm working on step two now. And I laugh at this because I'm like, oh man,
So
but my heart
uncomfortable.
felt great too. And he's like, I'm just not interested. And I think he's not. I truly knowing him, he's not. But this is not going to be the last conversation I have with him. He might listen to this podcast. He gets to the Substack. He's probably like, why are you talking about me, Mom? It's because I love you, Burke.
You have a fantastic name. Great nomenclature
Thank
there.
you. But it's
I
something that, well, can I say it goes back, I think, to what you were seeing in Indiana. Oh, that doesn't happen where I
Yeah.
live. Or that
Oh,
doesn't
somebody
happen
else.
at my child's school. Or that doesn't happen in my neighborhood. And we all have to just say it can happen anywhere to the best of people.
I have a I have a photograph. I have a couple photographs on my phone, Aaron, and one of them is of a young man that's at his signing ceremony at his high school, and he's
Mm.
committing to go to a college. And I'm going to apply some anonymity here, but he's going to a great school. He's going to play baseball. He has an amazing future ahead of him. He's 17. His mom is on his left. His dad is on his right. His coach, his brothers and sisters, and he's wearing the swag that you wear on commitment day. If you scroll over on my phone, fortunately you see his dad's number next. You scroll over one more and you see this kid, 17, dressed in a suit. He just looks sharp.
Mm.
Unfortunately, that photo is on the front of the handout you get at the funeral home,
Hmm.
because this kid with from an amazing family, raised in faith, he has a great future, has probably had the conversation that you had with Burke, but he did a dumb thing. And he did a dumb thing. We as 17-year-olds did dumb things,
Yeah.
except in this environment, there's no margin of error. He took on its face what was a 30 milligram Percocet, and his father found
Mhm.
him unresponsive the next day. And all their hope for that their son's future is gone. And we're prosecuting the dealer, the macro dealer of the pills. We're prosecuting the mid level mule that brought those that poison to him. And we're going to both federally and leveraging state charges, but that doesn't fill that seat at the kitchen table. And this is a great
Mhm.
kitchen table with a great family and a beautiful home. And they did everything right. But you know what? Their son made a dumb decision. The same decision that anyone who's my age, we made dumb decisions. The environment was different. The threat environment is different. We have to find creative ways. Awkward, it's one at a time with our kids, but it's we have to find creative ways. Ideally, we leverage technology to do prevention differently, because the threat is different. The frying pan in the egg in the frying pan is, as much as we all remember that,
Yeah.
or of a certain era remember that.
I remember
That
it.
I remembered it. I thought it was a great effort, but Saturday Night Live mocked that effort. The reality is that was well intended, but we can't approach prevention the same way now and be effective. And I that's why we are here in Kentucky are doing something
Yes.
different. And it was just mandated by the nature of the threat. We have about $500 million in opioid funds total that we are through a commission that stood up by our legislature. I went to that commission and asked for almost $4 million, because I sent my team across the country to scour ideas for prevention that works and backing up. To effectively push back on this threat in West Virginia and Kentucky, it has to be a three-legged stool. It has to be enforcement. That's locking up the dealer that
Mhm.
killed that young man. It's going after the drug trafficking organization. It's enforcement. It's policing. It's typically what you think about from a law enforcement response. We have to do that more effectively, collaborate more, uh, be more creative in that space. But I'm proud of our efforts there. On the treatment space, we finally here in Kentucky have enough beds. We have more beds per capita than any state in the country. As someone is the official responsible for ensuring that those dollars are spent effectively, have to make sure that every one of those beds, it's the most bang for our buck and being
Mhm.
effective in policing for fraud. So enforcement, treatment, those are a necessity. A few years ago, if you had a member of your family in active addiction, you're going to have to wait it out on a list. And we know that in active addiction, it's very easy to lose a loved one. And we lost loved ones when we didn't have a bed for them. Now we're doing those two legs pretty well. But Erin, I say this with great emphasis. What we weren't doing well and are still figuring out is prevention. So when you exist in an environment, you are have a duty to serve, or you're raising your kids in an environment where one pill really can kill and one dumb decision can end their life, you have to find ways to do prevention more effectively. And I sent our team all over the country to look for data-based, evidence-based programs. Find me something that worked. It doesn't have to be at scale, statewide, and there aren't, to our knowledge, anything that's as effective as we like to see it at the
Mhm.
state level. We've got great ideas, but none of it at scale. We're seeing pockets of it and some great work by nonprofits, some governmental entities. We're seeing some creative work in prevention, but it's not at scale. We partnered with a group out of Broward County, Florida. They have served a handful of counties in Florida effectively with, and I'll pause here, with an effort that I found to be, as a prosecutor and law enforcement officer, a bit social worky, right? It didn't feel right, because the effort is what they call a positive or positivity message. as much as I want to stand at that podium and say one pill can kill, the data says that, you know, and I know my own kids don't even listen to me, much less someone else's kid. A guy in a suit you don't know saying one pill can kill, that
Yeah.
so-called parental role. Like, yeah,
Mm-mm.
Godspeed, John Glenn, on that front. Uh, the evidence says that that positivity message that gives kids agency, and I don't not seeking
Mhm.
it gives young people agency. Let them give them data and let them make a decision for themselves. That's what this effort is. It's called Better Without It, and it leverages social media influencers, and it has to be the right influencer to carry that message with
Mhm.
authenticity and credibility to say you're better without it. And so we started with athletes, and anyone who knows Kentucky knows the University of Kentucky and the University of Louisville are just two twin titans of basketball history, particularly the University of Kentucky. And so we partnered with UK and U of L, Western Kentucky University, to identify players that could carry that message with authenticity. We did NIL deals with all three of those schools to use particularly Instagram, but some other platforms as well, to put those players out there. I stood with the University of Kentucky baseball coach, Coach Mangione, phenomenal leader, guy that really lives his faith. Coach Brom, football coach from the University of Louisville. I had blue on one side and red on the other at the announcement. My tie was, I promise you, 50-50, red and blue. And we rolled this out. And it's for kids to see someone they look up to. We know the power of Big Blue in Kentucky, the power of the Cards in Louisville. To have an athlete that is saying, "You want to wear this blue jersey, you want to play on that court, you're better without it." Along with
Mhm.
a number of other positive messages, but someone you look up to. And we're starting with athletes, and there's a lot of content that will be rolling out during basketball season. We're starting with
Yeah.
athletes. It can be bass fishermen, it can be archery, it can be future FFA. Our target audience is 13 to 26. It is the youth cohort, and we go younger. But the purported myth is that those use agreements, that there aren't kids younger than 13 online. We know that's a fiction. We know that kids younger than that are seeing it, but
Oh.
let's say the legal fiction is 13 under federal statute 13 to 26 with that positivity message. And we rolled that out a year ago. We've had a ton of hits, a ton of eyeballs on this content. This next year is going to be where we're putting the coach of the University of Kentucky, a young man from Appalachia, Trent Noah, who's from Harlan County, Kentucky. And those
Mhm.
many have heard some great country music songs about Harlan. It's the middle of the coal
Yeah.
patch. This is a young man, great basketball player, but just a fine young man and believer that puts a message out there that if you want to wear this jersey, you're better without it. So, a lot to come in that effort. We can identify with data up to the we can hone that aperture down to a zip code to determine who is the social media influencer
Mm.
in that space. The social media influencer in Louisville may be very different than in Bowling Green or in the mountains or in Paducah in far western Kentucky. And we're gonna identify them. We're gonna do partnerships with them, and we're gonna get that message out there. And as much as this sounds Pollyanna, admittedly, the data says that this is effective. And I promise you this: if this doesn't work, we'll pivot and do something else. We're gonna do what works. I would stand on, and I have a duty. I would stand on
Yeah.
my head in the National Mall if I thought that would have an impact. So we're going to be creative. We are being creative. We're going outside of our comfort zone. In addition to putting handcuffs on those that are killing our kids with poison, we've got to do prevention differently. We've got to use the right voices with credibility to talk to our kids about this.
Not only the right voices, but I've been on the Better Without It Instagram platform. Haven't been to TikTok yet. Can't handle them all. But I like the way they're addressing it in,
Great.
you know, are you scrolling too much? Is this scrolling? How does this make you feel? Because
Oh,
we're living in a world of all of these just distractions, screen distractions,
yes.
and we aren't taught how it could make us feel.
How you
So
can be
I love
manipulated.
that they're addressing these things because I think
Yep.
those bad feelings can lead to bad choices.
Look, we can say kids spend a ton of time online, but let's worry about glass houses here as we're throwing stones,
Yeah.
because as adults, how oftentimes do you find yourself looking at your watch thinking, what happened to the last 20 minutes?
Yeah. Oh, of course.
And with your phone in your
Yeah.
hand, because the YouTube content is, and you can argue it's great content, but the reality is, if we as adults get sucked in, what about our 13, 14, 15-year olds? And with an algorithm with some of these platforms that's specifically designed to get their hooks in and keep these kids' eyeballs hooked, because that's monetized. And I'm not here to plug many books, but I will tell you, if your viewers have not read Jonathan Haidt's Anxious
Hmm.
Generation, they are missing the most impactful, important book of this year. That explains this youth demographic, how childhood has evolved, what the risks are from these social media platforms, the exigent risk. And yes, it has a direct impact on what we're talking about in terms of addiction, because how childhood has evolved so differently. And then also how we use these tools for good. Like it's a Genesis 50 line, right? How it's meant for ill, we'll use for good. And that's what we're trying to do with this better without it effort.
Well, thank you for doing and addressing the demand side of this crisis. I find, the supply side is talked about a lot, but we cannot forget about the demand side as well, because we just can't keep every pill out of the country.
No, and I don't know anyone in law enforcement that is not approaching this from the perspective of just basic economics, that you have to hit both sides. It's not one or the other. It is very much all of the above. Uh, and it's requiring a degree to be effective, because we're
Hmm.
talking supply side and demand side. We're talking the medical community, the education community, how we work with tech companies to develop effective ways to mitigate, going beyond traditional badge and gun toters. That it is requiring us to tear down silos. We have a saying in our office. It's the culture that I've tried to bring to the office since I was elected. We call it zealous collaboration, and it's etched on the edge of my challenge coin. Zealous collaboration, and that means tearing down silos, and that can be in any one of the threats that we face in the law enforcement, public safety space. But in terms of the most exigent threat to our families, anyone that's watching this, anywhere you are, it's the most exigent threat to your family is the drug threat. We in government, and we can use terms like run faster. What does that mean? It means we're too siloed. It means we have to tear down those silos. It means we have to work with agencies that maybe we haven't worked with, or maybe we have a cultural aversion to. Look, I was an FBI agent. The fact that we
Yeah.
work with the Central Intelligence Agency, it took 9/11 to force
Yeah.
that at scale. We're experiencing 9/11 every few months in terms of those we're
Mhm.
losing. And yes, we're reducing overdose numbers, and I applaud every one of those lives saved. But that family of that young man that I talked about a moment ago that was going to college to play baseball, that reduction didn't impact them at all. There's still a massive number of Americans that are dying or their futures being crushed because of addiction every year. And we in government have to be more nimble. We have to be more collaborative. We have to zealously collaborate more effectively on both the supply and the demand side.
Yes, well, and I want to talk about one more thing you've done on the supply side, which is addressing the different face of drug trafficking and de minimis and closing the loophole. So, when did you really start becoming aware of de minimis and leading this effort?
And at the risk of getting too jargony too
Yeah.
fast,
Oh,
this is an example of elections having consequences.
yeah.
The minimus was, boiling it down, it meant that if a package was shipped into the United States, of a declared value of less than $800, this is a package coming from China, from Hong Kong, from Southeast Asia. If the shipper listed that it was valued at less than $800, there was no examination upon
Right.
arrival at the United States. It was like we say in the country, like a hot knife through butter, our defenses. And we allowed that. Now we allowed that to incentivize small packages and to encourage development of shipping infrastructure. I get that. But the reality was, in this environment, we were allowing a loophole. We'll call it the fentanyl loophole that
Hmm.
allowed this poison to come in without any inspection whatsoever. And so in government, this was identified to me several months before the end of the Biden administration. There was an effort to have the Biden administration address this. This is something that there was potential to close it. Not the statutory close didn't require Congress to gavel in. This was something that could have been addressed internally within the executive branch. And crickets. And we wrote to, and I say we, so oftentimes it's never me standing alone. It's 24 attorneys general. We collaborate very, very well on so many of the big things we do, whether it's litigation or highlighting the fentanyl loophole. 24 of us wrote to the new Trump administration, just laying out, please take a look at this. This is a loophole. This is opening our door to the world with no inspection. And within 72 hours, Aaron, within 3 days, the Trump administration closed this loophole regulatorily as it applied to Hong Kong and as it applied to China. 72 hours. They got it. They immediately responded. And more permanently, that big, beautiful bill that contains so many components, well, one of the components was that loophole was permanently changed. This was the great example of cooperative federalism, a great example of states working together, highlighting an issue that only the federal government could address, the border, and its plenary authority at the border. And within 72 hours, we had an administration that was responsive. And I applaud this president. I applaud his team. They put their money where their mouth is in prioritizing protecting this country from dangerous drugs. It was, I can't praise them enough for their quick action here. It saved lives. Full stop. It saved lives.
Yes, I mean, they're doing a great job on supply side and keeping
Yes.
as much as they can out of the country. And I think that's why you see so many um, family members of fentanyl and poly drug victims rallied around President Trump because he talked about taking action on these things. And I really don't understand why the other side did not want to address it in the same way. Um, Now, there's always more we can do on the demand side. I think we should make it easier to get into a bed. In some states, it's 14 days of recovery, and that's it. And that is not long enough with opioid use
It's
disorder.
far too. I'm no physician. It's far too acute. I mean, common sense says that the brain is so damaged, and science
Yes.
says you need a prolonged period of time. And so, no, that's window dressing. Is what that is. Unfortunately,
So we
that's
just
window
need
dressing.
to also work. So there's more to do. I mean, I want to be a happy warrior. There's more to do, but I am really glad we are taking, it seriously on the supply side and stopping as much of these drugs as we can from coming in. Now, I know we're
Urgency.
coming,
Well,
yes,
tackling this with a
urgency.
sense of urgency, viewing this
Mhm.
as a national security threat, viewing this
Oh,
because
it is.
why would the Attorney General of landlocked Kentucky ever use the term national security threat? The reality is, and I've been to the southwest border, I've stood at Yuma, I've been briefed by the Border Patrol, I know what that dynamic looks like now. But I can tell you that why would a landlocked state like Kentucky care and say things like national security threat? Because we are a border state. We are a border state. Given the manner in which this poison is distributed, the use of parcel, the use of shippers, the manner in which it's distributed, there's not a state in the nation that's not a border state. And so this issue, the issue of a secure southwest border, is an issue of a secure border in our Commonwealth or in Indiana or in West Virginia. It's not hyperbolic political language. It's common sense. It's the real threat that we face.
No, agreed. Well, we're coming up on time. Is there anything else you'd like to discuss today?
I, it's the catch-all question that I
Yeah.
used as an agent, and any good interviewer would use. I'm just grateful. You say happy warrior. I'm again grateful for you diving in on this issue set with such expertise that you have built both someone that cares deeply about West Virginia, a state that's been really gutted like Kentucky,
Hmm.
but someone that brings a great intellect to this. And I want to thank you, one. I will start with where I'll finish my gratitude for what you do in putting together this platform. But I leave your viewers, your listeners, with that message that we are parenting, we are raising kids, or those listeners that are in governmental roles in a no margin of error for our young people. And the policies we make on the supply side, the demand side, the 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 responsiveness, the sense of urgency we bring, we have to be aware that we're doing this in a no margin of error environment for our kids, which should spawn this sense of urgency. We have to view the drug threat as, from my perspective, the greatest national security threat to most of our states and most of our communities. The poison that's killing our kids, we don't produce it domestically anymore. It all comes from over a porous southwest border with Mexico. And so this is not an R&D discussion. This is not a build the wall, it trigger a shutdown of the conversation from those that may have a different letter behind their name than mine. It is where the poison is coming that is putting your kids at risk. Post 9/11, we invaded Afghanistan, invaded Iraq ultimately. I had the privilege of serving in Iraq as an FBI special agent. We toppled governments because Americans were killed, because of our sovereignty was impacted, was disregarded. I'd like to see a similar sense of urgency from all those in elected and appointed positions with responsibility, a similar sense of urgency and looking at the source of this poison. And I applaud the Trump administration. I applaud the president for his sense of urgency and how he discusses this, because we know that those Mexican drug cartels are metastasizing. They're only going to get larger. They're only going to get more impactful. The sense of corruption that their money buys will only encroach into the United States further unless they're pulled out root and branch. And so why would the Attorney General of Kentucky give a damn about what goes on in Mexico? It's because what goes on there is killing kids in the 120 counties that I have the privilege of serving. And so I applaud you for what you're doing here. I applaud the sense of urgency, the president's focus on this, but also I plead with your listeners to have these uncomfortable conversations like you had, like I have regularly. I don't want to hear it, Dad. Well, you're going to hear it. You're going to hear it because the threat is just that large. You've got to have these conversations and stay tuned. Watch the creative things we're doing here in Kentucky to take opioid settlement money and to try to save lives. And if you have great ideas, and certainly they don't come from Washington or our state capital, I'm hungry for them. Reach out to Erin, reach out to me if you have great ideas on the prevention front. I have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. I'm here to listen. And if you have great ideas, prevention efforts that are working, we want to learn about them. We want to try to implement them, but better without it. Take a look at our site.
Better without it, and I'll share it in the newsletter. Thank you for joining us, Attorney General Coleman.
I'm grateful. Thank you.